Every year on November 3rd, for 18 years, Robert Chambers drove to the same bakery in Savannah, Georgia, and ordered the same chocolate cake with the same blue frosting and the same plastic soccer ball on top. Because that was what his nephew, his son, to every practical and emotional definition of the word, had wanted for his birthday since the age of 3, and Robert had never once asked if the preference had changed. He assumed it hadn't. He assumed it the way you assume things about the people you have raised, which is to say completely, without thinking about it, the way breathing is assumed. He drove to that bakery every November 3rd. He carried the cake home in both hands. He set it on the table. He sang the song. On November 3rd, 2022, he drove to the bakery. He ordered the cake. He drove home. Marcus was not there. He had not been there for 7 months. He had answered one text in that time, a single sentence, at 11:43 on a night in May, that said, "Uncle Rob, I need some space. I'll call when I'm ready." He had not called. Robert put the cake on the table and looked at it for a long time, and then sat down on the kitchen floor, not in a chair, on the floor, and stayed there until it was dark. He had been doing that, sitting on the kitchen floor when it got too heavy to hold upright, for 7 months. He had not told anyone. Marcus Chambers had come to Robert when he was 18 months old. His mother, Robert's younger sister Denise, had struggled with addiction since her early 20s, had tried and left treatment 3 times, and had surrendered temporary custody during a 4th hospitalization with the agreement that she would get clean and come back for her son. Robert was 32 years old at the time, unmarried, working as a high school history teacher in Savannah. He said yes without deliberating. He said yes the way you say yes to blood when blood is asking. Denise did not come back when she said she would. She came back 2 years later, stayed for 6 months, and left again. She came back once more when Marcus was 7, stayed for a year, and then disappeared entirely. Robert filed for legal guardianship in 2009 when Marcus was 8. The paperwork was straightforward. The judge asked Marcus, who was 8, which home felt like home. Marcus said, "Uncle Rob's, because he comes to my games." Robert raised Marcus the way he had been raised, with expectation and presence and accountability, and Saturday morning errands and Sunday church, and a rule about grades that was non-negotiable. He was not Marcus's biological father. He never pretended otherwise. He was honest about Denise, honest about the addiction, honest about the complexity in the plainest language an 8-year-old, and then a 12-year-old, and then a 16-year-old could hold. He told Marcus, "Your mother loves you. She is sick, and I am here. Both things are true." Marcus played soccer. Robert drove him to every game for 12 years. He coached the team for 4 of those years. He sat in the second row at Marcus's high school graduation with a sign that said, "We did it, we." When Marcus got into Savannah State on a partial scholarship, Robert paid the rest, $14,000 a year for 4 years, from the savings he had been building since Marcus was 3. He told Marcus it was invested money. He did not tell him it was savings he had started specifically for Marcus's college before Marcus was old enough to understand what college was. Marcus graduated in May 2021. Robert sat in the first row. He was 53 years old. It was the proudest day of his life. For real home, or just visiting home? That was what Marcus had asked when he was 4 years old, and Denise had come for one of her returns. He had asked it from behind the door of Robert's kitchen, loud enough for Robert to hear from the next room. In a voice that was trying to be casual and was not casual at all, Robert had stood very still and listened to his 4-year-old nephew figure out the difference between a home that holds you and a home you visit. He had not answered for Marcus. He had let Marcus find the answer himself. Later that night, he had gone into Marcus's room, and sat on the edge of the bed and said, "This is your real home. Whatever happens, this is the one that is yours." Marcus had fallen asleep with his hand in Robert's. Denise reappeared in October 2021, 5 months after Marcus's graduation. She had been clean for 3 years, which was the longest stretch of her adult life. She was living in Charlotte with a sponsor and a job and an apartment and a phone number that worked. She called Marcus directly. Robert found out about the contact 2 months later, when Marcus mentioned it casually over dinner. He had not told Robert. He had been talking to his mother for 2 months without telling the man who had raised him for 18 years. Robert said, "I'm glad she's doing well." He meant it. He had never stopped hoping for Denise. And he was also a man who understood, in the careful, honest part of himself, that Marcus had always been waiting for this. Waiting for the moment his mother came back whole enough to be his mother. That was not a betrayal. That was human. Robert knew that. What he had not predicted was what happened next. In January 2022, Denise's aunt, a woman neither Robert nor Marcus had ever met, died in Charlotte and left Denise a substantial inheritance, $380,000. Denise, newly stable, with money and the desire to make good, sat down with Marcus and made him an offer. She would pay off the remainder of his student debt, $22,000, cover his first year of graduate school, and give him $50,000 to start his life. In exchange, she asked one thing: that he move to Charlotte and spend the next year close to her. She wanted to know her son. Marcus called Robert in May 2022 and said he was moving to Charlotte. He said he needed some space. He said he'd call when he was ready. He had not called. He had not called in the 7 months that Robert drove to the bakery and carried the cake home and sat on the kitchen floor. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Robert had applied to Family Feud before any of this happened, a year earlier, when life was Marcus's graduation and Saturday mornings and everything being intact. When the taping date came in March 2023, he almost canceled. His sister Yvonne, who was on the team, told him he was going. His friend Gerald said the same. He went. He sat in that contestant's chair looking like a man who had decided to show up, even when showing up was the hardest thing available. His team was Yvonne, Gerald, Gerald's wife Monique, and his own daughter, his biological daughter from a relationship in his late 30s, a woman named Kayla who was 22 and had grown up with Marcus as her older brother in every sense that mattered. Steve Harvey introduced the family and got to Robert and asked him what he did. Robert said, "Teacher, 30 years. Steve said there was something about a man who taught for 30 years that he respected completely. He asked Robert what he had learned from students in 30 years. Robert said that the ones who leave always come back if you kept the door open. Steve stopped. "What door are you keeping open?" Robert looked at Kayla. She nodded, and Robert Chambers told Steve Harvey what 18 years looked like. He told it chronologically: the guardianship, the soccer games, the college savings that was never called college savings, the graduation sign that said, "We." He told the part about Marcus being 4 years old, asking if it was a real home or a visiting home. And he told what he had answered. He told the part about Denise coming back clean, which he said with no bitterness at all, because he had none. And he told about the phone call in May 2022, and the text that said space, and the 7 months of November 3rd birthday cakes with nobody home to eat them. He said, "I don't blame him. His mother came back. He needed to know her. I understand that." His voice broke on the word understand. Just that one word. The studio fell completely silent. Kayla put her hand over her face. 300 people held still. Steve Harvey placed his cards on the podium. He did not speak for a very long time. Then he said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I mean it from the place that cost me the most to learn." He paused. "I know what it is to give everything to someone and have them leave. I know what it is to sit in something. I was in a car. I was in parking lots. I was in circumstances I am not going to detail here. And I know what it is to wait. And I know that the ones who leave always come back if you kept the door open." He stopped. He breathed. "You said that. You said it first. And I'm telling you, because 30 years ago I was the one who left something I should have stayed for. I know that you will get that call. Not because it's fair, but because what you gave that boy for 18 years does not disappear. 18 years don't disappear." "Stop everything," Steve said. "We're stopping the game." He turned off stage. The producer appeared. Steve shook his head once. "This has never happened in the 45-year history of this show. I don't care. Some things are more important than game shows." He walked Robert to the front of the stage, and they stood together, and Steve held the microphone steady and said, "What does Marcus need to know right now, if he's watching?" Robert looked directly at the camera. He said, "The door is open. It was never closed. It will never be closed." The audience did not applaud. They were too quiet for applause. A sound technician near the back of the stage was looking at the floor. Steve pulled out his phone. He called a family reunification counselor, live, on speaker, a specialist in estrangement recovery between adult children and parental figures. He explained the situation in 4 sentences. The counselor said, "This is exactly what I do. 18 years of that kind of love doesn't disappear. It waits. Please have him call me." Steve arranged the consultation on the spot and covered all costs through his foundation. But Steve wasn't done. He looked at the competing family, the Washington family from Memphis, and before Steve could ask anything, their eldest son Marcus, a different Marcus, a coincidence that made the room go electric, stood up from his seat and said, "My uncle raised me too. From age 5. I know what this man is." He walked across the stage and shook Robert's hand, and the 2 men stood there for a moment in a silence that everyone in the room understood. Both families received the $25,000 prize. The audience rose. Steve Harvey looked at Robert Chambers, looked directly at the camera, and said quietly, 18 years don't disappear." When the episode aired 8 weeks later, the clip of Robert saying the door was never closed became the most shared piece of Family Feud content in the show's history. It reached 340 million views in 12 days. The hashtag #18 years don't disappear was used 6.1 million times. It was shared in adoptive family groups, foster care communities, step-parent forums, and by every variety of person who had raised a child they had not made and loved them as though they had. Marcus Chambers watched the episode at his apartment in Charlotte, alone, on a Tuesday night. He called Robert at 11:47 p.m. Robert answered on the second ring. Marcus came home for Thanksgiving that year. He brought Denise. They sat at the same table. Robert, Denise, Marcus, Kayla, Yvonne, and Robert made the meal he had always made, and Marcus sat in the same chair he had always sat in. And at the end of the night, when everyone else was in the living room, Marcus washed the dishes. He did not ask if he should, he just did. Robert stood in the doorway and watched. He did not say anything. On November 3rd the following year, Robert drove to the bakery and ordered the chocolate cake with the blue frosting and the plastic soccer ball on top. He carried it home in both hands. He set it on the table. Marcus was there. A year after the taping, the Open Door Foundation, established through Steve Harvey's foundation, provides counseling, coaching, and reunification support for non-biological parental figures navigating adult-child estrangement. In its first year, it served more than 900 families. The Foundation's motto came from Robert's own words. "The door is open. It was never closed." Today, Marcus splits his time between Charlotte and Savannah. He is in graduate school. He calls Robert every Sunday. He came to Robert's 56th birthday dinner in April and made a toast that took 11 minutes and ended with the sentence, "You never stopped being my dad. I was just too young to know that was what you were." Kayla cried for a long time after that toast. So did Yvonne. Robert did not cry. He looked at his son, because that is what Marcus was, and had always been, and he nodded once, and that was enough. If this incredible story of unconditional love, open doors, and a man who kept a birthday cake warm for 18 years touched your heart, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. Share this with someone who believes that love given freely is never wasted, even when it waits. Have you ever kept a door open for someone who you weren't sure was coming back? Share your story in the comments. Because as Robert proved, love doesn't have an expiration date, and 18 years don't disappear.